Brother Gary. All right, we're going to be in Genesis chapter 42 this morning. If you need a lesson handout, please raise your hand and our ushers will bring one to you. Happy New Year. My wife and I are excited to start 2025 in the Southwest Bible class. Very thankful for the opportunity. And we are working hard on learning names and faces. And there are about 200 people in our class total. Obviously, not everyone can be here every week. And so we have a printout of about 21 pages long, just of names and pictures. And so be patient with us as we're still learning. And if we make a mistake, just forgive us. Amen? All right, Genesis chapter 42 is where we're going to be this morning. But we're going to begin in Genesis 41. And for lesson number 56, when everything seems to be against you. Genesis 41. And verse number 46. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt. And in the 7 plenteous years, the earth brought forth by handfuls, just a superabundance. And he gathered up all the food of the 7 years which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up the food in the cities. The food of the field, which was round about every city, laid he up in the same. And Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea, very much, until he left numbering, for it was without number. And unto Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of famine came, which Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bare unto him. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh. For God, said he, hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. And the name of the second called he Ephraim. For God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. And I'll just say this in passing, that Joseph learned to overcome. One secret to that is leaving the past in the past, or putting the past in the past. And he thanked God that God had made him forget the toil of his father's house. And he thanked God for making him fruitful in the land of his affliction. Verse 53 says, and the 7 years of plenteousness that was in the land of Egypt were ended, and the 7 years of dearth began to come, according as Joseph had said. And the dearth was in all lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. And when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said unto all the Egyptians, go unto Joseph. That's called passing the buck, by the way. Go unto Joseph. Because, by the way, Pharaoh's, any king has reason to be concerned during a time of famine. Sure. People can rise up, revolutions take place, and so Pharaoh is saying, hey, go talk to Joseph. Joseph is taking care of everything. And it says, what he saith to you, do. And the famine was over all the face of the earth. And Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold unto the Egyptians, and the famine waxed sore in the land of Egypt. And all countries came into Egypt to Joseph for to buy corn, because that the famine was so sore in all lands. And so we left Joseph in a good place last Sunday. I said last week that if you like a happy ending, that is the chapter for you. After all those years of difficulty, betrayal, hatred, adversity, disappointments, Joseph has come out on top, and God is the one who made that happen. God brought him forth. God brought him forth in his father's house, in the prison house, in Potiphar's house, and now in Pharaoh's house. He is second in command of Pharaoh. He has a wife and 2 bouncing baby boys. The land has enjoyed its 7 years of extreme plenty. And now they have entered into the 7 years of famine that God had already revealed would take place. And so that's where chapter 42 begins, 2 years into the time of famine, 2 years into that 7-year time frame. And so when chapter 42 begins, Joseph has been gone out of Canaan for 22 years. 22 years. We know that because 13 years from the pit to the throne, and then 7 years of plenty, and now 2 extra years of famine. So 9 plus 13, we come up with 22 years from the time that he left his father's house to go check on his brethren to the time in which his brethren leave their father's house and Joseph's going to check up on them in Egypt. So 22 years, I know we know this, but 22 years ago is a long time. 22 years ago was 2003. Where were you in 2003? In 2003, our youngest son, who just got married, was born. 22 years is a long time. And a lot of things have changed. Joseph is now 39 years old. His baby brother Benjamin would probably be about 25 years old at this time. And he hasn't seen his baby brother since he was a baby, a toddler, back in Canaan. His oldest brothers would have been in their late 40s, and Reuben, the oldest, probably would have been around my age, around 50. We've seen God work in Joseph's life, but remember that we have two parallel tracks running. One is Joseph in Egypt, and the other is Jacob's family in Canaan. We saw a little glimpse of that with the time focused in on Judah. As Joseph is going through all of his time of adversity, things are happening back in Canaan, and now these two parallel tracks are about to intersect again in chapter 42. In fact, chapters 42 through 45 are Joseph dealing with his brethren and bringing them to God bringing them to a place of family reconciliation and restoration. In fact, I would even say that it's better than a restoration, because their family dynamics are going to be so much better after this takes place than they were before. As we work through these chapters, by the way, I want you to remember this, that relationships wrecked by sin can be mended by God's grace. Amen? We have a lot of broken families in our society. A lot of broken hearts, a lot of broken lives. And I love the fact that here we have a very messed up family that had been a very toxic situation, and yet God is going to use Joseph to bring healing, reconciliation, and restoration, or better than restoration, into their family dynamic. As we work through these chapters, I want you to keep your eyes on first Jacob. What's been going on in Jacob's heart for the last 22 years? And then secondly, keep your eye on Joseph. What is his heart condition when these events begin to take place? When he suddenly is faced by his brethren again, how will he respond? And what does that tell us about Joseph's heart? And then thirdly, keep your eye on Jacob's sons. What is their heart condition 22 years later? And what's been going on in their hearts? Are they the same men that we saw 22 years ago, hating their brother, deciding to kill him, settling on selling him instead of killing him? Are these the same men, or has something happened in their hearts in the years since then? Well, notice first, I want you to think about Jacob for a minute, because though he's someone in the background, we haven't yet finished his story. When Jacob came back to Bethel in Genesis 35, he was met with a series of tragedies. First, his beloved wife Rachel died in childbirth, giving birth to Benjamin. Secondly, Deborah died, and Deborah had been Rachel's nurse, and there apparently had been somewhat of a motherly relationship to Jacob. And then when he gets back home, he finds that his mother has already died, his father dies soon after, and then Joseph seems to have died. At least that's the report that he received from his sons. 22 years ago, he clutched the bloody rags of that coat of many colors and declared he was going to go to his grave sorrowing. And he refused to be comforted. I kind of think 22 years later that rent, blood-soaked garment is still hanging in his living room somewhere. When I studied Jacob's life, and some of it's implied, maybe I'm reading into it, but it just seems to me that he has not handled his grief in a way that is healthy. In fact, when I see Jacob at this point in his life, he seems very cynical. He seems caustic with his sons. He seems pessimistic. I think that we've seen Joseph, he sees God everywhere. and in everything. Jacob at this point doesn't seem to see God anywhere. And what's telling is when you get to Genesis 46, when Jacob finally hears that Joseph is truly alive, it says his spirit revived. His spirit revived. When he found out Joseph died, something died in him, so to speak, and is going to be revived when he learns that Joseph... So that's kind of in the background, but keep that in mind because, hey, listen, have you ever run across an old grouch? Say, Brother Raz, I'm married to one. Okay, well, let's keep that to ourselves. But have you ever run across an old grouch, been related to an old grouch, and they just, and they can never see the good in anything. They can find a problem for every solution. They grumble, they complain, they've got no joy. They're kind of difficult to be around. And you ask yourself, how did this person get to this place? Because it's hard to imagine them as a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old as a young grouch. Well, many times they were just as joyful and happy and excited about life as many of us, but then something happened. Maybe a series of things happened. And they perhaps did not handle their grief with faith. Keep that in the back of your mind as we work through these next few chapters. Not going to focus as much on Jacob, but keep him in mind, and because I believe there's some lessons there for us as well. Now, we come to chapter 42 and verse 1, and it says, "Now when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, Jacob said unto his sons, Why do you look one upon another?" So in my mind, I picture a long kitchen table, and Jacob and his 11 sons sitting around this table, and there's no food. And Simeon says, "Hey, would you pass?" Oh, never mind. There's nothing to pass. There's a famine. And I just see them sitting there looking at each other. They're all hungry. And Jacob finally says, why do you sit here looking at each other? There's food down in Egypt. Go down into Egypt and get us some food. And so it's good to see that Jacob is still the patriarch of the family. He's going to now take the lead in providing for his household as he should. And he initiates sending his sons down to get food for their entire family. But I read this, Barnhouse said this in his commentary. The word Egypt in their ears must have sounded like the word rope in the house of a man who's hanged himself. It takes a second to think about, but the word Egypt must have sounded in their ears like the word rope in the house of a man who's hanged himself. In other words, they know Joseph was sold down into Egypt. When they hear Egypt, I don't know, I just kind of see them sitting there looking back and forth at each other. Egypt? Now, they've lived with this terrible secret for 20 years. And now God is going to make them face up to the past. Now, notice verse 2. He said, Behold, I have heard that there is corn in Egypt. Get ye down thither, and buy for us from thence, that we may live and not die. And Joseph's 10 brethren, notice that 10 brethren went down to buy corn in Egypt. But Benjamin, Joseph's brother, Jacob sent not with his brethren. For he said, Lest peradventure mischief befall him. Jacob does not trust his sons. 22 years later, he does not trust. In fact, I think he has some serious suspicions about what happened to Joseph. It is very difficult to have a healthy relationship without trust. In fact, I would say it's downright impossible to have a healthy relationship without trust. Right. And yet this family, you have a father that doesn't trust his sons, and frankly, I don't blame him. In fact, when they get down to Egypt, Joseph doesn't trust him either. I know how it ends, and I don't want to trust them. This is not a trustworthy bunch. These are the kind of guys that they stole from you, and yeah, okay, I forgive you, but I'm not going to leave my wallet out with you around, okay? There's a lack of trust between father and sons, even though they're grown men in their 40s and 30s, yet Jacob does not trust them. And I'll just say this again. Husbands and wives, there's got to be trust. We must do nothing that would hurt the trust in our relationships. Amen. No secrets. Amen. Nothing hidden. Right. Except Christmas presents. And even that's going to come out. But nothing hidden. Nothing on your phone that your spouse can't see. Nothing in your search history. Nothing on your computer. Nothing in the back of the closet. Nothing in the trunk of your car. Nothing going on at work that you would not want them to know about or to witness. Live above board. Live a trustworthy life, because that will erode and break down relationships. Jacob does not trust his sons. He's not going to send Benjamin, the only son that he has left of Rachel. And so he sends just the 10. All right, now verse 5, it says, "And the sons of Israel came to buy corn among those that came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan." So imagine people from all over the world at that time coming down, great numbers of people, and here are the 10 sons of Jacob among them. Verse 6, "And Joseph was the governor over the land, and he it was that sold to all the people of the land." Now, I've got some questions here, and I don't know if I'll have any answers. Maybe some of you have thought about it and have some answers. But I wonder why 9 years into this, Jacob has not reached out to his father yet. I don't have an answer. I'm just curious. Why hasn't he sent a messenger back home? Maybe God's providence stopped him because God has a bigger program that's going to take place with his brothers. Maybe Joseph, have you ever had a situation that you just didn't want to go back to? Sure. And maybe he just keeps putting it off. But then I also wonder, why is Joseph the one that's in charge of all the food distribution? Why doesn't he delegate that to someone? Why is he the one sitting there watching as everybody comes to buy food? And I wonder, and I can't prove this, again, this is speculation, but I wonder if he's not watching for someone coming from Canaan, and he wants to be there in case any familiar faces show up, especially Dad. If Dad comes down, he doesn't know how this will work out. So, again, I'm reading into this, but I'm just wondering, why is he in charge? Why is he taking this as a personal responsibility? And I personally think that he did so because he's expecting his family to come sooner or later, and he wants to be there, doesn't want them coming in and leaving without being recognized. All right, verse 6. It says, "And Joseph's brethren came and bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth." Hey, does that sound familiar? Deja vu? A couple of dreams a long time ago? Remember the sheaves bowing down? Remember the sun, moon, and stars bowing down before Joseph? And he sees his brethren, he recognizes them, even after 22 years, but they don't recognize him. All right? So here's what I'm thinking. He sees his brethren, and he starts counting. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 2, 4, 6, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Where's Benjamin? Where's Benjamin? Have they killed Benjamin like they were going to kill me? Did Benjamin become the favorite? And now that I'm gone, did they do something to him? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Where's number 11? And I think that's why he answers him roughly here, because he's seeing them for the first time in 22 years, and he wants to know, where's Benjamin? Why isn't he with you? He has trust issues, and they're well-earned trust issues with his brethren. So in verse number 7 it says, "And Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them, but made himself strange to them, and spake roughly unto them." By the way, he's speaking to them in Egyptian through an interpreter. "And he said unto them, Whence come ye? And they said, From the land of Canaan to buy food, sir." I just imagine their voice trembling. He's answering them roughly. "Where are you from?" Glaring at them. "We're from Canaan." And he said, "And Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew him not." Now you might ask, why didn't they know it was Joseph? Well, 22 years has passed. I think we all understand that, hey, at age 39, you look a lot different than you did at age 17. Amen. Up to 17, you're growing this way. From 17 on, you start growing that way. So at 39, it looked a lot different. Plus, he's dressed like an Egyptian. He's vice Pharaoh. He looks like an Egyptian. Then they're not expecting him there. You ever run into someone even that you have seen in the last couple of years, but you see them in a different context? Sometimes I'll be traveling somewhere and someone from college or someone from the past, is that you, Brother Raspberry? Because I don't have a tie on. They don't recognize me out of my uniform, right? But this has been 22 years and he's speaking roughly. He's not speaking Hebrew. He's speaking through an interpreter. He looks like an Egyptian. He's older. And so they don't recognize him, but he certainly recognizes them. Where's Benjamin? Now, I said last week that Joseph had one last test, but that was just one test in that particular course. You know, we never stop going through tests. And so let me review some of these tests that he's gone through over the years. How would he respond to his brother's hatred? How would he respond to being sold as a slave? How would he respond to being tempted by Potiphar's wife? How would he respond to being falsely accused and thrown in prison? How would he respond when he's forgotten for 2 years by the butler? How would he respond during those 2 years? Would he lose his faith in God during that time? All of that was finishing his bachelor's degree in the University of Adversity. Now it's time for his master's degree. How would he respond seeing his brothers again? Abraham Lincoln said this, "Nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give him power." Now, imagine a different scenario. Joseph on a throne-like structure. He's the one in charge of distributing the food. Here come his 10 brothers. If he had been holding a grudge, anger, hatred, looking for some opportunity to take revenge, here it is. Who's going to stop him? Who's even going to question him? When he says, these men are spies, take them out and just kill them right now. Or these men are spies, take them and throw them in prison and throw away the key. Or these men are spies, take them down to the slave blocks and sell them as slaves and get them out of my sight. There would have been no one to stop him. He has unlimited power next only to Pharaoh. How would he respond? Hey, how would I respond? How would you respond? Someone you just can't stand. Maybe someone who's hurt you deeply. Committed some great sin against you. Abused you in some way. Most of us don't really have the power to take revenge or retaliate without risking legal repercussions. But here's a man who can do whatever he wants with no legal repercussions at all. Well, I think that's a good question for us. That person in your life or in your past, what would you do if suddenly faced with them again and you had unlimited power? Would you be as willing as Joseph to forgive and be reconciled? Would your heart be as tender, as we're going to see in later passages, as his? But he also didn't reveal himself immediately as Joseph. He didn't look down at his brothers and say, "Oh, you're back. Woohoo, hey, I'm Joseph. Give me a hug." Now, we're going to see that Joseph's going to, where's Benjamin? He's going to begin working through this plan, this test of his own for his brothers. And so, by the way, if he had said, "Hey, I'm Joseph," he wouldn't have known their sincerity. They would have just started fawning and started praising him because he has the food, he's got the power. He wants to know what's really in their hearts. Now, in verse number 9 it says, "And Joseph remembered the dreams which he dreamed of them and said unto them, You're spies, to see the nakedness of the land ye are come. And they said, Nay, my Lord, to buy food are thy servants come. We're all one man's sons, we are true men. Thy servants are no spies. He said unto them, Nay, but to see the nakedness of the land ye are come. They said, Thy servants are 12 brethren, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. Behold, the youngest is this day with our father." Oh, that's where Benjamin is. At least that's what you say. I don't know why you'd lie to me about it, because you don't know I'm Joseph. "And with our father, and one is not. And Joseph said unto them, That is it that I spake unto you, saying, You're spies. Hereby ye shall be proved. And I believe that statement is the key to chapters 42 through 45. Joseph is proving his brethren. By the life of Pharaoh you shall not go forth hence, except your youngest brother come hither. I want Benjamin here. Bring him here. And so he says, Send one of you, let him fetch your brother. Verse 17, he put them all together into ward 3 days. Now that word ward is the same one used for prison back in chapter 40, I believe chapter 40, where the baker and the butler were put in ward, which means they're put in prison. So he is going to put them in prison for a while. I got no problem with that. I kind of like it when the bad guys get what's coming to them a little bit. Maybe I shouldn't. It's okay, they're not going to get hurt. Sitting in jail for a few days won't hurt them any. Might be good for them. I'm on Joseph's side in this. I say go for it. 3 days, hey, let's see what happens. But notice in verse 21, they said one to another, We are verily guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish of his soul when he besought us, and we would not hear. Therefore is this distress come upon us. And Reuben answered them, saying, Spake I not unto you, saying, Do not sin against the child, and you would not hear. Therefore, behold, all his blood is required. So what are we getting a glimpse? What is Joseph getting a glimpse into? Remember I said, watch the hearts of Jacob's sons. What do we see there? Guilt. Long-standing guilt. These men, they're older now. You know, kids do stupid things. They were young at that time. Now they're older. Oh, we shouldn't have done that. And they can still, in their dreams and their mind, they can hear the anguish of his soul as he's crying out from the pit. Reuben said, I told you not to do it. I told you not to do it. And they don't realize that Joseph can actually hear everything that they're saying and understand what they are saying. Verse 23 says, They knew not that Joseph understood them, for he spake unto them by an interpreter, and he turned himself about from them and wept. So now we're seeing into the heart of Joseph too, aren't we? Wept. He's not gritting his teeth in anger and hatred, just holding back his desire for vengeance, but actually you see a tender heart towards his brothers. He recognizes guilt in them, but he's still going to put them through this test. Now, they come back home, and I got to wrap this up. They come back home, and Joseph changes the terms. He allows just Simeon to stay behind and sends the other 9 brethren back to Jacob. And then he really scares them by giving them not only their food, but putting their money back in. And when they get home, Jacob, they have a big argument about why the money's still there. And then look at verse 33. The man, the Lord of the country, said unto us, Hereby shall I know that you're true men. Leave one of your brethren here with me, and take food for the famine for your households, and be gone, and bring your youngest brother unto me. So in other words, they tell Jacob, all right, to get any more food, we have to take Benjamin with us. He's not going to give us another grain of wheat unless we bring Benjamin back. Now let's look in the heart of Jacob. Verse 36, And Jacob their father said unto them, Me ye have bereaved of my children. Joseph is not, and Simeon is not, and you will take Benjamin away. In other words, every time I get my kids get around y'all, I send Joseph to check on you, he doesn't come back. I send you away with Simeon, he doesn't come back. Now you want to take Benjamin away, and Benjamin won't come back. He's angry. He's grieving. And he's afraid. And notice what he said, All these things are against me. You see, Joseph sees God everywhere, but Jacob's at a point where he sees God nowhere. Now, you and I reading these chapters, we know where this is going, right? Hey, are all these things against Jacob or for him? These are all for him. These are the first steps towards being reunited with his son Joseph, being taken care of down in Egypt. These are the first steps in that direction, but he doesn't recognize that because he's not looking by faith. He looks at his circumstances through the eyes of doubt and unbelief, and he comes to the conclusion, all these things are against me. I just can't win. I mean, my sons keep disappearing, and it's all your fault. And he doesn't recognize that God might actually be involved and can bring good out of what seems to be bad circumstances. Well, aren't we sometimes the same? All these things are against me. Look at all the problems I've got. Where'd God go? It's everybody else's fault. Look what you've brought into my life. Instead of being like Joseph and saying, well, I'm going to make the best of my circumstances. I'm going to trust God. I don't know where this path is leading, but I'm going to put my hand in God's hand and just keep on going. That was Joseph's attitude, but it's not Jacob's attitude. And you and I have to make our decisions. Are we going to trust God in those times, or are we not going to trust God? Well, then Reuben says, well, slay my 2 sons if I bring them not to thee, which I've often wondered what his sons thought about that offer. But verse 38, he said, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is left alone. If mischief befall him by the way in which you go, then shall you bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave. So that's where that chapter is going to end. And it's where it's going to pick up. Because, hey, you're not getting any more food till Benjamin comes down. And Jacob's going to have to finally trust God with his son. And we'll see how that works out in the next chapter. Thank you for being here this morning. God bless you. You're dismissed.